Already off to a rough start. So placement first, and I got to make sure this stays within the view. Be thinking about size, placement. You know, that's my mistake right here, was just putting in that head. Not too much information there yet. Okay, this is just a black wing. It's just a graphite pencil, and I've been working with charcoal forever, and I really haven't worked at all with graphite. I'd say in the last, I don't know, almost like 20 years. I don't know, I like what charcoal can do, but I've discovered that the graphite works really well on this paper. Trying to just always remember, keep it simple. Keeping it very, very simple. So I started with these, just the simplest kind of outliney shapes. I haven't measured anything. I'm kind of looking at the general height versus the general width. I don't know if that's right. There's a little bit of room here. If I need to adjust it, looks like I've got a lot of room on the bottom. If I need to make her a little taller, and I might need to. There's a foot right here, and a shin. And there's a knee right here. So I'm just, I guess it's like a puzzle. I think I've mentioned puzzles before. It's putting together a puzzle, but you kind of get to make up how they all fit together. There's a hand there. And I shouldn't throw you guys off. That's not a hand, it's just a shape, right? That's almost like a diamond shape. Once you start seeing things as their shapes, and not what they are, that's really going to help you improve your drawing. I think this is okay here. That hand comes down further, so there's a hand here. This is a very complicated drawing. I think I always say that. And it seems a little, initially sometimes it feels a little overwhelming. You're a little overwhelmed by something, and at that point you want to like maybe pick up a drawing aid, a projector or something to kind of just find the drawing in there. But if you stick with it, keep looking at all these shapes, look how they all fit together, you really can do it. Look at plumb. We're using plumb lines here. So plumb line is just a straight line, and so what's up here to down here is just using gravity. So you can plumb line things. Like a good example, I suppose, is there's a highlight on her knee, which is probably about right there, and it plumb lines down underneath, pretty much an eye. I don't have an eye here yet, but I know it's not clear over here. If that highlight was over here, I'd know I'd have my drawing. I'd know my drawing is way off. But we look pretty good there, so that makes me feel good. You can triangulate things. So we also have, this shoulder is really drooped down. She really is, this shoulder is actually up a little higher. And this shoulder droops down a little bit, so it's really soft. What you're really seeing here is more of her back. And so that shoulder, so you can look at an angle. First of all, let's see how far is the angle. So I'm using this angle, and I don't even really know where her chin is. I haven't sized up her head. I can make her head bigger or smaller at this point very easily. Looks like it might be a little small. What's more important is where her chin is in relationship to some of these other things. So looking at that chin is really straight across. Yeah, it's actually further down in that. I might bring that shoulder up. And that, that's something, is like, do you bring the chin down or the shoulder up? Well, just kind of keep moving around and keep looking. I don't know, because there's other things that we have to fix. This, I can see this breast is probably out too far. Lots of things to fix. So, and if you get too, you're feeling like everything's just, you're maybe close, but you're like me, maybe you put down too many lines. I have a bad tendency to maybe just put down too many lines. You can just do this. Just efface it a little bit, and then maybe some paper, if it's charcoal, you can just rub your hand over it and just kind of smear it in a little bit. So then you have these really ghosty, you haven't lost anything. It's still all here. I can still see that highlight mark I put. I can still see her head. But that just kind of like resets things just a little bit. And then you can come back and say, okay, what do I need to change? Let's maybe check a couple more. I think that's probably pretty close. I felt like I had her breast out here way too far. So this arm, I had some things off, like that arm comes in, I think, further. And that other elbow is going to be kind of down there. This juncture right here, because we have this arm junctures into this. Remember, these arms are just cylinders. And then it goes right behind the knee, which is really, if you kind of think about that, that could be a big rectangle. Kind of represents that boniness of the knee. And then this arm, so that arm kind of goes behind, this arm here goes behind the knee, comes down here. And then this arm is back behind. And she's kind of supporting herself on this arm, which is why this shoulder is a little higher. Then this shoulder drops down, and like I mentioned, you can kind of see her back here. So what I felt like was weird was, let's see, her hair. She has so much hair. Her hair is so thick. She has these long, kind of tendrily bits of her hair coming down. Maybe a little shorter, and then her breast is maybe more. Yeah, that's tricky. That's going to be tricky. There's a little negative space right there. I can see right through. That's an important thing to look for. Look for little areas you can see through. And this is her rib cage on this side. This is her right arm, and this is her breast. So you know what's on all sides of that. And then that kind of falls under that hair. You can this breast is hidden behind the arm. This is her rib cage. So I know I'm, as at least it's I know I've got the right. It's a humanoid. It's not an alien. I hate it when I draw aliens by accident. And it still happens to me. I'm still drawing a face or portrait or something, and I'll look at it and think, oh my God. That's not even from this planet. Erase. I don't know. It still happens. You're never too advanced to not accidentally draw an alien, I guess. Maybe I should try drawing aliens. Maybe I'd be good at it. All right. Well, so I'm gonna just work away on these lines. Just nothing different here. I'm just, again, finding things. I'm looking at distances, and I'm comparing those distances. Comparing, like, this is difficult here because there's not really a line. Her armpit actually ends down here, so I'm making kind of a construction line to complete that shoulder, and then I'm looking at the distance between that and her back. The distance between, comparing those, and then I'm comparing this distance. And I'm still you got to be careful not to get this distance too long. I don't want her to look like her shoulders are too big. So we still might need to pull that in a little bit. I'm not sure. I feel better about the chin. So it's just continuing to compare. I try to imagine if a line it's a construction line. If this line continued, which is the division between her upper arm and lower arm, it makes a little line there. And I imagine if that line were to continue, where would it go through? And it would go right through this arm. And you can actually check its angle. That actually looks pretty good. So I know that this relationship is looking good. And you can imagine a construction line goes right through that highlight of the knee. And then if that construction line kept going, looks like it would hit her big toe. So we know, you know, maybe, I think initially I was thinking her toe is going to be more over here, but maybe her foot's going to be maybe more, and I don't know how far down here it is yet. We're just kind of looking at relationships. We could drop a plumb line down. Actually, a plumb line's just flush with her back. So that was a preconceived notion I had wrong in my head, is that her foot was over here, but now I'm looking, as I drop a plumb line down her back, it comes almost to her toes. So that's kind of just, you know, puzzle piece. I'm filling in that puzzle piece. Check angles like that. That's her upper thigh. It's all in perspective, but it's not horizontal. It drops down just a tiny bit. Little things like that can really throw you off. And then that hand, so you can look and see that's a construction line, so that doesn't really exist. So, and this is all in such shadow down here, I can't tell. But her hand exceeds her back. So yeah, so I'm just continuing. I'm not going to do anything different than any of this for the next few minutes before we start putting in any shadows, because this is a complicated drawing. We want to make sure we've got the structure here first and we don't get things too out of whack before we start putting down some value. There's certain anatomical things that I also need to take into consideration before I go too far. So I would have to say, you know, it's really hard when you're drawing from a two-dimensional image on a screen, which is what we do. You know, it used to be from a photograph, but now it's from usually a computer monitor. But always try, and maybe this is like when you work more from life, this informs you better. If you're kind of exclusively from photographs, maybe you really can't translate this as easily. But when you're looking at a two-dimensional image and you're translating that, you're translating a two-dimensional image into a two-dimensional image, but each image represents three-dimensional space. And it's not really just a matter of transferring, what you see. I mean, that is a large part of it, but it's really, really helpful to try to see your drawing and the photographic image as three-dimensional. God, did I explain that right? So I guess where I was going with that is you need to check some anatomy and make sure that our anatomy is making sense. And as I'm looking at both these arms, and I'm trying to imagine both arms in three-dimensional space, and in the relationship to that, what I'm looking for is there any foreshortening going on? So they're both coming at kind of strange angles to each other, but as best as I can tell from the photograph, neither upper arm is foreshortened to me. So you got, so in that case, you have to say that, well, both her arms have to be the same length, right? Okay. And that caught my eye just a little bit. I thought this looked a little short compared to this one. We do have, let's see, this elbow, you kind of have to see where that elbow is. I think this one just needs to go up a little higher. And I think that is mainly what it was. Where this elbow is actually down, here. So that it might have a little bit of an optical, so okay, those look really good. That might have a little bit of an optical illusion. Now I'm going to take that dimension and I just want to see, so it looks like my hand, so we'll talk about proportions in another video, but basically got to take that, that's pretty close. I think the wrist just needs to come a little higher. She has a bracelet, which I like, and in the painting I definitely want this bracelet. The bracelet means a lot to her, so it's an important thing to have in there, I think. But yeah, I think maybe, unfortunately, the fingers are behind something there. And this, this is the core. So you have to make sure these relationships are all right. So you get down here, you have to make sure these relationships make sense to each other. It's the idea of working from the inside out. So if you're over here working on this deltoid, an arm, you get this all great, fine and anatomically correct, and maybe you're over here working on this rib cage, but then you realize there's not enough space or there's too much space in between, you're all messed up. So same thing with this hand. So I've all of a sudden found myself just putting so much information into that hand. That's not a smart thing to do. Even though that hand might be just fine, but there's information around that hand first. So we should really, I should really spend a little more time, because just kind of like what was going on here with all these intersections, kind of have the same thing going on down here. And I can't really see into my image very well right now. I could lighten my image up and so I can see into the shadows a little bit better, but kind of don't want to in a way. I think that's another thing to be aware of. If you can't see into the shadows, don't be putting things into the shadows. Don't be making stuff up. And knowing that a photograph is going to gain contrast, that's something. Maybe that's a different issue. But if you're working from life and you're trying to see into a shadow, a face or something, or an eye, and you can't see in there, and you start trying to put it in your drawing, and you're making it up, it's going to look made up. There's really only a few artists maybe could even do that successfully, especially when it comes to a face. So if you can't see into a shadow, don't be putting stuff in there. I think that's actually the right length. I think that this is foreshortened. Okay, I know, well, this is obviously foreshortened. This is her knee. This is her hip. So if you could see inside there, there's a femur that's running back away from us, back to its joint back there. So that's all in foreshortening. It's wrapped around like this. And then the same thing here. This is foreshortening and going away from us. This is tucking underneath this leg. And this leg is coming toward us. But this could be a mistake, and I guess I could move my camera over here a little bit, but I'm pretty close to the edge of my paper too. I'm going to extend that knee just a little bit. I think the drawing, it's no fun if we're copying this image exactly. So, there's things, this is why we do this. It's like we don't want to copy things. We want to change things to how we see it. And I just think a leg that maybe comes out a little longer might be a little better for the pose. But at that point, so if you are gonna extend this out because I like this feel better, you have to realize that could make this too long. So that's a change I might make. I might just draw that foot back a little further. So I'm not making that up, I'm just changing it. If you're a landscape painter and you come across three trees in a row out in the maybe 3 pine trees, and they're all right in a perfect row, you don't copy that, right? Those are terrible trees, by the way. So you have these 3 pine trees and they're just spaced just like that. No, as an artist, you're going to do something like, you're going to take this one and move this one over here. So there's more of a gap, right? A big gap and a short gap. So you don't space things. So that maybe falls under the same thing. So I'm not making things up. I'm just changing things to see how to make them fit what I want them to be. That's kind of like the excitement of I don't know, any drawing. Now, some things I need to look at that are not, so we get down here to these edges, I feel good about the inside, feeling good about this, but now all of a sudden I'm kind of down here. I'm looking at the photograph. Although her wrist is right there, I think she just has really long hands, which is possible. And the fingers, because her fingers, I'm looking at the photograph, her knuckles are well below her shin. And so I've got her knuckles and her shin lined up, yet her ulna, the end of her ulna, is right in the middle of her calf. So I have to figure out what's different from my drawing. So I have to figure out maybe what's going on there. Maybe I've got this too long, because if this is too long and I'm trying to relate this hand, this feels short to me. I like the way I've lengthened this, but this is feeling short. So this could be off too. You know, you just have to kind of realize what could be off. I think that probably needs to come down a little bit more. I think this needs a little more thickness. That'll actually be a shadow. She does have she's very long, a very long model, very lean, very long. So we don't want to make her look, well, I don't know. I'm not trying to copy her, but I don't want to make her look, you know, what am I trying to say? I guess if anything, I'm going to make her look even maybe longer and more slender. I don't know. Something maybe like that. Let's get that, let's lengthen that. And that has a lot to do with the thicknesses too. Very, very strong. She's very outdoorsy, and she's got very, very strong shoulders. And I ask myself if is that something I want to portray? I kind of do. I think that's kind of cool. So I think this is all feeling really, really good. I like all of I like how it all fits together. So you can see with this, what we were talking about with that portrait, she's looking down and the hair comes over, and this is all in shadow. So we're really, we don't really get much of a sense of her face. In there somewhere, eyes are in sockets, so that's a good example. I'm looking at this eye's in is like super dark socket, and so is this one. So I'm not going to go in there and carve out these eyeballs. First of all, I don't even know if they're in the right spot. And second of all, I can't see into those shadows, so I'm not going to go in there and put a linear drawing of a eyeball in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to represent the socket. Something like that. That's probably not too far off. I really can see mostly her forehead. So we really have to think about where her hair comes down. And those proportions, we talked about the thirds, forehead to the eyebrow, eyebrow to the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin, and then, somewhere up here is the hair. Okay, that only works when the face is not in perspective. It works profile and straight on, but she's looking down, and so that kind of throws that off. But you can still use it. Still use it. These dimensions are going to be a little smaller because she's looking down, in this dimension of her forehead, and especially her hair is going to be the largest of these segments. So we really need to watch that. I don't work linearly this long, but I think it's a good thing just to show you guys what to look for in structure. But I think most of us tend to be a little bit more of a linear approach, especially as a beginner. So if that's your approach, I want you to make sure you're doing it correctly. So now I'm just going to come in and start adding tone. And for me, really, tone really helps define shape and proportions, because you can break things up very easily. This one's a little more convoluted when it comes to that. Let's see, like for an example here, that part of that thigh is in shadow, and there's not a hard line, but we consider this the terminator line. Terminator line being between the shadow side and the light side. That's so many construction lines in there. Wow, who did that? So you can look at something and break these shapes up. So shapes that are really long and broad are hard to kind of figure out their relationship to everything around them. If you can break things up into smaller little units, they're easier to see. So maybe, simplifying this, we have a terminator line here on the back side of this deltoid. So we can say light side, shadow side, and see that shadow goes all the way down into that rib cage. And there's a shadow there. And so you can start even using this shadow on that wrist. And so you can start looking at what shape does that make. And then you're comparing that to this. Now you can compare the light that the hip makes here. And I don't have that hand quite the right size or shape. But this light right here, it's kind of a strange, almost triangular shape. So you use the light and shadow to refine your puzzle pieces. And to me, for me, that's the easiest way to draw, is I use that. But, if you're doing a little more like gestural drawing, where you really don't have shadow, there's a lot of different ways to approach drawing. I'm just breaking this up. This, I don't know, I enjoy this part of drawing. So this is all mass. So I should be able to retain a little bit of that shape in there. Oop, gotta be careful. The light comes down through there. So yeah, the light comes down. Okay, so so this just mass that all together. The toes poke out. So the next lesson on this would be value massing. And you're looking at these little shapes, the big toe and the foot. This is all in shadow. Let's see, that shadow of the knuckles could be blended into that. This is all one mass tone. Let's see, and then this is a great place to let the anatomy blend in together. So those light tones. So now you're looking at, this is called value massing. So the anatomy of the arm is here. All right, the terminator, it's actually pretty close to the edge. I'll probably pull that back just a little bit. The terminator, which is just what we call the separation. It's an imaginary line, but it's the separator between the shadow side and the light side, if you don't know that. But that's casting a shadow down on that shin. So that's in shadow. And for right now, see, that actually kind of ends right there. I'm going to mass that shadow together. And even though I can see that shin right there, we can mass all that together. So you mass all of these big shapes together, it makes your drawing or your painting so much stronger. It's a simplification process. And this is all, so the complicated thing with this drawing in some areas is there are lots of, down here it's a little more black and white, I guess literally. Where we're just getting light patches and dark patches. But up here, we're getting reflected light. The anatomy is a little more complicated, so it's not quite so easy to define that. But let's just work on getting these values down a little bit more. And right there's a good example of that. That goes from, it's interesting. I love this, where this is catching this super hard cast shadow on both sides of that. From this knee here, because this is what's casting is clear up here, we're into this super soft, it just blends out into this light of this leg so gently you almost hardly don't even notice it. And then that's really back here, this is a cast shadow from her head. That is cool. That's the kind of stuff I like. But yeah, this is so subtle. And then this is light behind her, so that's good. This is really, her rib cage down there is really dark. But again, big value mass first. Even you can even blend that. Let that go in there. This is lost and found. This is all lost and found. Great. Try to find as many of those. Right here, you could do a little, join those together. Could even join that together. Those values aren't too far off. Those values aren't too far from each other. So you're kind of connecting them. So it just makes a really strong visual. Can't think of the end of that. It makes a real strong visual element. Face is the same thing. So right now I've just got it all in shadow. Really her nose, I'm just going to halftone the entire thing. All I really see up here is her forehead, that little shape of her forehead, and the shape of her nose. That's about it for the face. I see a little bit on each side of the nose as we get into a little more detail. And then of course there's some reflected light in the cheek. Each cheek has a little bit of reflected light, but so I might push the values of that even stronger. But you can kind of see, let's do this too. There's cast shadow down here from the knee, which is kind of like this, which is a great element to bond your subject to the background, is a cast shadow. So one thing that bothers me sometimes in my work, or I see that it's not my favorite in others' work maybe, is when the figure looks like it could just literally be cut out. Like you could take a pair of scissors and cut the figure out and then paste that down to a background. So for me, it's always super important to connect the figure to the background. Come down there, so that's all dark. Was going along really good until I got to this hand. And it's funny, like the first time I drew it, I think it was just too big and kind of bulky. And then I think gotta get the bony structure right here. There we go. That's better. I think right there. And then drop that thumb down. And then the second time I drew it, it looked like a mitt. And you know, again, that's the same idea though. You know, God, don't come in and draw each individual finger. Draw the overall. We're always talking about draw the big shapes first, right? Have you heard that? I suppose, you know, it's one thing to hear the saying, but to really try to like internalize what it means is another. But it's everywhere, you know, overall the whole thing, but even in individual areas. So just like that hand, draw the overall shape of the hand first. Do not mess with fingers. Did separate that thumb, which is kind of part of what's struggling. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny that this thing was just going, I was just cruising through this. I was feeling so happy. Well, I still am. I'm still happy with this, don't get me wrong. And then I ran into a hand that was like, oof, you know, that doesn't look good. And it happens a lot. Usually it happens with the mouth, you know. It's like, I think this mouth's okay. There's a line right there I don't like. You know, the mouth is just, when I kind of squint at the image, the mouth is just this little, oops, just the hand, you know, so the hand is just, it's okay if it looks a little bit like a mitt. Maybe the mitt was okay. Her fingers actually, there's something a little different here. You can actually see this finger. The finger actually wraps around her thumb. And I guess I have to decide if I want to do that or not. It's not that much. Okay, so I didn't put enough perspective in. It just, you barely just see just a little bit of it kind of wrapping around that thumb, just right there. I guess that's kind of nice. So I think we probably should do that. So you're actually seeing the top of the hand just a little bit, and you're probably kind of seeing the top of that thumb. So maybe that was one thing. I was thinking of the hand just from the you know, the top of the hand, but or you know, from looking straight on, but you're actually looking a little bit kind of down on the hand. So you're going to get a few little different shapes. So that's something that's going to take some thinking. So, you know, if you're working on an area like that and you're just struggling with it, I would highly recommend moving to another, just move to another spot. And I think I'm not quite seeing the bony structure of the hand. Yeah, you can see the knuckles. You got to find the knuckle of the thumb. That first knuckle's right there. And then that just needs to kind of come down into that wrist. So maybe something like that. So then that's okay, but the thumb looks a little large. And it could have something to do with that line. So anyway, I'm struggling a little bit with that hand. So I'm going to take my own advice and work somewhere else for a second. Oh, but it's so close. So close. Okay, that's not too bad. All right, so let's just move on. But I'm pretty happy with that. I'm still kind of glad I enlarged this leg, but we also have to, even enlarging that, or what I'm doing is I'm making a little less perspective. But we still also don't want her to have this gigantic knee. So we just need to come in here. I can't see into those shadows. Those are really dark. There's this really dark shadow right here. And she's on a black. In the photograph, she's on something black. So we're really not getting a lot of reflected light up into those shadows. So we'll just run that right into that. The only thing that maybe shows that that's a shadow is the separation right here. So it's shape. We're back to shape. But right there, we're just going to run the values right together. So here's going to be another one of those hands. Hands can be fun. Actually, I kind of enjoy hands. I really like drawing feet. But hands can have so much personality. Still want to make sure that upper arm doesn't look too long. I think maybe a little bit what's throwing me off, which is totally cool, is that bracelet. Still like the bracelet. It's got a little weight to it, so it's got to hang down under the hand, right? It's got to go over, because there's an example of seeing through the form. The bracelet actually doesn't have any, it's facing straight at me, so it's just making a rectangle. But let's invent maybe a little curvature to it. And if we can do that, that helps give this area three-dimensionality. And I think that might work. That's just actually got these cool little rounded segments. So that's just the overall shape. So I can come in and redefine that in a little bit. There's circles. It's kind of these interlocking circles. There's another one down there. So then that changes its shape a little bit. But anyway, that's the idea of changing something to make it look more artistic. So again, you don't just copy the photograph. You've got to do this. You've got to get in and investigate what it's telling you. And drawing something, I think, is the best way to do that. And I think part of that, and when I say drawing, usually drawing, you can draw with anything. You can draw with paint, but in this case, I did mean draw with charcoal or pencil or pen. So what you're doing with that is you're eliminating color, and that you're just simplifying things. We're always simplifying things, right? Always simplify. Detail last. So this has got to be one of my favorite parts of this. Somewhere in there is a separation between the... so you guys are catching me. I can kind of see into that photograph a little bit. I just need to lighten it up. I can kind of see that just a little bit. I'm not making it up, but there has to be a little bit showing that this is the shin down here, and the knee. This isn't quite right. That probably just needs to be... the kneecap is kind of right. I got to figure out where that kneecap is. That might actually be the kneecap right there. And this is the end of that's the distal end of the femur. That is actually it's actually the muscle on top of the femur, but that's making that highlight. I think the kneecap is just a little bit below that. That's all. Can just keep that real simple in the drawing. We really don't need to define any of that. I do want that highlight to pop out, so we need to push everything down just a little bit. Let's push all the values down. Oh, what I was going to mention too, as I was putting in these values, to remind you, just keep squinting, simplify simplify both your drawing and the reference. And really, look, I'm looking like this is a darker value. Kind of combines with that value just a little bit. This is much lighter because it's really catching some reflected light from something. That's her rib cage. And then you're looking and say which is darker. You're comparing. Just like we were comparing shapes when we were doing this, now we're comparing values. Which value is darker, which value is lighter. And we're looking at the value here compared to the value back in here. These are a little darker. This little spot right here is really dark. This is quite dark. This is very dark down here. So this is as dark as this. I'm a little concerned that might look a little weird if I go too dark with it. So that's where like observation, where I'm talking about just look at your values, and then I look at the concept just a little bit, and I have to ask myself if maybe that is too dark. One thing it does need to change, just like what we did here, make that cast shadow describe the form. The cast shadow in reality is really straight, but let's go ahead and curve it. And this is kind of a little shade, a little darker right there too. Right here on the hip is what catches the light. That's her hip, her iliac crest. Okay, I'm squinting down. She has a tattoo here, which in this one, it's not really going to show. I got to decide if I want to put that in. It may look weird, the fact that I can only see just a little bit of it. Just hint at it a little bit. It kind of comes down here under her breast. So, let's see, just some dark spots in there. Anyway, this is darker than the background. And there's that cast shadow, which I like. And then that's much darker than this leg. And remember I mentioned this leg just slowly comes out into light. Just very, very slowly. So that's just what I'm thinking. I'm still working. Let's see, those fingers are all in shadow. It's a plane change. This plane up here is facing the light. And then the fingers are turned down, so they're not facing the light. There's going to be a little bit of light there. The knuckles. And there's cast shadow right here. So you notice I just keep going over the whole thing. I keep moving. I don't stay in one spot. But I think this one's pretty much done. It's really just a few local areas I need to work on. See, I've kind of lost this. It's through that hair, but there's a really nice highlight right there. The best highlight though is I think right there. Well, no, probably the biggest one's on her nose. So that's what I like about toned paper. When you draw on toned paper, then you can just use little bits of chalk. A double form right here that I've missed. I just keep working these forms. This is kind of an anatomical. This is the muscle right there on the inside of the leg, and then it's kind of the natural form that leg has. I got to be careful not to over delineate some of these. I'm not sure. There's other forms in there too on that knee to describe it. See, there's a little reflected light on top of that wrist too. So maybe that'll help show that. That is really dark there, but I just didn't want it to look like it's a tattoo or something, which it's not. And then also, let's look. Oh, see the highlight. I talked about the highlights. The local tone a little bit, because she spends a lot of time outside, and her shoulders and arms are exposed to the sun. And her legs, least at this point. I'm sure there are times in the year her legs are probably very tan too, but this time we happen to catch her with very pale legs, which is kind of cool. Still not happy with that. Back in here. So let's see, there's a little bit of light on that shoulder, but again, the shoulders are very tan. Push that down a little bit. It's still got some construction lines in here. I thought about getting rid of those construction lines, but I actually kind of like them. So let's see. So let's just leave them. Come back into that face a little bit more. I kind of picked those cheeks out a little bit. See, there is a little bit of a separation between that upper lip. I'm going to just take that out, though. I don't want that to look, I don't want that to catch your eye. Really, the nose, see, this side of the nose has a little bit of shadow on it. It's really the top of the nose and then the highlight's right there, but I'm not sure I'm going to worry about that highlight. And then back in here, it's toned down a little more. So just like when we were working down here, we're just comparing one value to the next. Quite a lot going between the eyes. These values are the darkest. This is very dark down here. And under the chin, this under the mouth, quite dark. And there is a little bit of light. The lips are just very impressionistic. There's a little bit of light on the lower lip, not very much. And she does have these very deep on the ends of her mouth, which is kind of fun. I think when I draw her face, sometimes it looks like I'm exaggerating that, but I'm really not. They're just very deep. Just with the way the mouth goes into her cheek is very deep. It's almost looking like she's smiling here, but she's not. So I don't know. That's okay. But I'm totally happy with this. I'm excited about this. Find the art in it. Find what it's trying to say to you. What caught your eye in it, and learn to investigate your imagery before you just jump right into it. Gotta make sure that it's not looking like a tattoo. That's okay though. Work on that a little bit more. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for watching.